Hello everyone. Welcome back to another webinar on the topic of digital security. We'll do a short intro and discuss some of the best practices and tips that at the end of the day will improve the level of security in any industry, including obviously the oil field. So let's go ahead and do our usual sound check first. Okay, so please push the raise a hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window if you can see me and hear me. Let's give it a few seconds. Okay, I see everything is just fine. I see hands coming up and we can proceed to our next slide. All right, so the agenda for today. We're going to do a short brief on digital security, an overview of some of the common threats that we may face on the internet on a daily basis, a short discussion on cloud and what it means to have your data in the cloud. And we'll talk about a few tips and tricks on how to improve the cybersecurity posture of your company. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So we have already discussed this topic quite a few times in our past webinars. But just to give you a brief on what exactly digital security, or more commonly known as cybersecurity, is, let's define it. The definition is the protection of computer systems and networks from the theft of or damage to their hardware, software, or electronic data, as well as from the disruption or misdirection of the services that they provide. From a technical standpoint, all the forms of digital information that you are going to possess are going to be considered as files. Now, obviously, we need to store those files somewhere, either locally or remotely. And we will usually need to transfer those files from one location to another by making use of physical media such as USB drives, hard drives, external hard drives, or local networks or internet. So as you can see, digital security or cybersecurity is a broad term, to say the least. It includes all the aspects of securing digital information, starting from the basic concepts such as protecting your computer with an antivirus, and all the way up to digitally and physically securing, for example, a data center that may hold information for millions of users and networks that are used to transfer that information through. So just to give you an idea, the global cybersecurity market statistics are shown at the bottom right section of this slide. So with the compound annual growth rate at 9.7%, the value of the market is projected to reach $345.4 billion US dollars in year 2026. Okay. So next, let's go ahead and discuss a little bit of the common threats that we can face in the digital world. Nowadays, information is arguably the most valuable commodity, and if the value of the information is high enough, there will always be someone who will try to obtain it by any means necessary. So in 2021, global cost of malware was around 6 trillion US dollars. And that figure is the triple of the figure that we had just 2 years before that in 2019. So let's talk about a few common digital threats that any of us may face in the digital world. A little bit about the malware. Simply put, these are all types of malicious code or programs that are put into the device of the user without the knowledge of the user. Some can self-replicate, some can open a backdoor for external access by the attackers, some will lock and destroy information, software, or even hardware. So viruses, worms, trojans, ransomware, and a lot more are types of typical malware that we can encounter on a daily basis. Now, a few words on attacks. It's not going to be news. Us humans are always going to be the weakest link in the chain. Hence, we will be the initial target for most attackers, involving social engineering, phishing, vishing, scams, so on and so forth. Identity theft is also a very common threat. You can get into a lot of problematic situations if an attacker manages to steal your identity and pose as you in a digital world. So, just a reference, a full access to someone's stolen digital identity, assuming that it was stolen, is worth roughly $1,000 in the dark web. So it's pretty scary and probably pretty problematic stuff, which can be attained for just $1,000. Okay, let's move on to our next slide and talk about the cloud, what it is, and how to deal with it. So, what exactly is the cloud? As it's defined, the cloud refers to servers that are accessed over the internet and the software and databases that run on those servers. Cloud servers are going to be located in data centers practically all over the world. So think about it. A huge portion of services that you use online every day are going to be cloud-based. It's going to be emails, it's going to be social media, it's going to be streaming services, office applications, and much more. So the proportion of the data in the cloud is going to grow. Users are able to access their accounts, their files, their photos, videos, and everything from practically any device from any place on the earth, as long as they have internet connection. All the computing and storage takes place on the servers and in the data centers. So the user device is not key to computing. So for example, if someone loses their phone and they just go get a new phone and they log into their cloud account, for example, Instagram, they're gonna have everything intact and all their information, video, audio, and photos are gonna be there. So it technically ensures data integrity and availability. The big cloud service providers are always going to enforce strict security measures and controls, and businesses can significantly lower the IT costs by switching to cloud computing. So they're no longer going to be required to do their maintenance on their own servers. Think about data storage, so on and so forth. So, how much data is in cloud actually? So, as a statistics, this is the share of the corporate data in the cloud, held in the cloud worldwide from the years 2015 to current day. So, as we can see, 2022, we already have almost 60% of the corporate information held in the cloud. And again, this number is going to grow because cloud computing is far more beneficial for businesses, especially small to medium sized businesses, than the actual IT costs that are involved by attaining their own hardware and software and maintaining those systems inside their corporations. Yeah, what cloud is and how it holds data, let's go ahead and discuss the tips and tricks that we can utilize to improve our digital security posture. So what we will be discussing in the next few slides and up to the end of the webinar is going to be how to assess your IT infrastructure. Understand the devices that you have, whether you are cloud-based or you have service on-premise, how you store information, how you access that information, so on and so forth. Then we will need to understand what we need to protect. Is it only just digital information that we possess, or do we have physical infrastructure as well? Again, servers, computers, storage, maybe mobile devices that we hand out to our employees, phones, tablets that can be used in shops, so on. Then, after understanding what we need to protect, we need to understand the level of protection that we need to apply. So, we'll need to assess the risks associated with losing the information for each type of the situation, and obviously take measures to avoid, mitigate that risk, or negate that risk. And obviously, yeah, we're gonna implement necessary measures. Put policies in place, make access control decisions, and enforce strict access control rules, device protections, and we will need to obviously secure the weakest link in the chain as humans. We will need to do user trainings, and we will need to raise awareness for our employees and users and understand how we can improve our employees' knowledge of the digital security or cyber security. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about device control. Now, there will be a lot of situations that a company may require an employee to utilize a certain device to perform his tasks. It can be a phone, it can be a tablet, a laptop, a specific design device for a specific task to be performed. This list goes on. The company may decide to purchase the device and provide such devices to its employees, or it may as well allow the employee to use their own device under certain conditions. So let's see how those two types of scenarios will compare to each other. First of all, the bring your own device scenario. What it has is that employee obviously is going to own the device, so he or she will have all the freedom in the world to govern that device. It's going to be managed by the owner, and the personally identified information is going to be controlled by the owner, meaning the company will not have any responsibility, nor can it control if the information will leak out. Now, devices like this, if they have no restrictions or no control on whatsoever, they may pose security risks for the company, for the corporation. So those risks may include that the information of the company will not be segregated from the personal information of the employee, and it can be obviously easily accessed on the phone by some means that can be employed by an attacker, or even someone who, aside from the employee, has access to that particular device. So the bring your own device obviously is not going to pose provisioning costs for the company, and the company at the end of the day may require additional security measures or controls to be implemented on that device of the employee. Now, let's talk about a little bit the corporate scenario, and particularly corporate-owned business only and corporate-owned personally enabled, scenario. So the company is going to provision the device. Obviously, in that case, the company owns the device. And since it owns, it dictates the security measures and the controls that the IT team will enforce in any known device, in any device that will be passed to the employee. Now, it can be either corporately owned business only, meaning the intent will be a specific purpose, and aside from that, the employee will not be able to do anything else. And this kind of devices can also be shared between multiple employees. Let's say as it's a tablet for a maintenance purpose left in the shop that every single employee can have access to and append or edit the maintenance information on that particular device. Now, on the other hand, we have the corporate owned and personally enabled device, which obviously is again corporately provisioned and managed and can have security controls and configurations enabled. And it also has segregation of applications by intent, meaning by obviously the personal side of the employees' apps information and the business information and the business apps. So the controls can be enforced on those types of devices, and the company will have the ability to, if enabled, to erase the device in the case of the loss or damage to the device or the device being stolen. So now that we've discussed the device control, let's move on to our next slide and talk about a little bit on access control. Simply put, access control is a selective restriction of the use of specific resources. It can be information, it can be physical devices, mobile devices, laptops, computers, networks, data centers, so on and so forth. The common levels of access to any type of information can be described as obviously no access, read-only or limited access, and full access. And the common user types are going to be the regular user and the privileged user. The privileged user will have full access or may have full access to certain aspects of the functionality of the product or information. So privilege does not always mean that the user has the highest level of access. So what the best practices are that we can actually implement to secure our access control? Well, first of all, we'll need to set up permissions for access. Then we'll need to set up roles for our users. And it's going to be a good idea to assign our users to certain groups. Now, assigning a certain responsible staff member, if the company does not have an IT department, is a great idea, because that person will be in charge of all the access control aspects and will be monitoring constantly on daily basis if something has gone wrong or if something needs to be changed. The use of least privilege principle is always going to be the best idea. And that means you assign only the necessary access levels and permissions to the employee that are required for the certain task to be performed. You'll need to employ security measures if you are going to allow your employees to bring their own devices. You will need to have at least some principles and guidelines that can be used, and a few controls that can be implemented on the device itself. It's going to be a very, very good idea to employ an information security policy or set of policies, and enforcing strong passwords, considering multi-factor authentication and biometrics, is always going to be a better idea as well. So let's move on to our next slide and talk about passwords. Now, I'm not really going to start explaining what passwords are and how important it is to have a good password. I think we've all have that knowledge and are kind of past that. So I'll just go through some guidelines on how to create a strong password that can be trusted, and it's not going to be easy, at least, to be broken. So one of the obvious ones: use at least 8 characters. 12 to 16 is a great approach. 16-character passwords, it's gonna take a ton of time with a huge list of known passwords to be cracked. Let's keep it that way. Include uppercase, lowercase letters, include special characters, Unicode characters, and make it easy to remember. You can even create a phrase and substitute some letters by symbols or numbers, such as S with a $sign, O with a 0, A with an @ so on and so forth. And you can create a passphrase, which will be far more secure than having a single word password. And on the other hand, it's going to be far way easier to remember than just a single word password. It's also a good idea to change your passwords frequently, though there has been a study recently showing that the passwords that have not been changed very often are way more secure than the ones that have been changed on a frequent basis. But again, that's just a study that will need a lot of more research to be done on that, and let's just stick at what we have at this point, the trusted source. We're going to keep changing our passwords frequently. Now, what not to do: do not tell your password to anyone. Obviously, you know that, right? So don't keep it in a written piece of paper, in a written form, on your desk, on a sticky note, on your monitor, so on and so forth. Reusing old passwords is not going to be a good idea, because that old password might be known by someone else or might be already cracked, so reusing it increases the chances of the new account to be compromised. Do not use the same password for multiple personal accounts, and do not use the same password for personal and corporate accounts. So if you have, which probably is the case, more than 1 or 2 accounts, email, social media, YouTube, business accounts, so on and so forth, use different account passwords for each one of them. Trust me, that's going to be beneficial for you. And at the end of the day, when if one of your accounts suddenly gets compromised, you can be sure that no other account is compromised alongside with that one. Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit on information security policies. Having policies in place that regulate companies' IT processes and govern information security is going to be really, really helpful. It will allow you to self-assess your company, understand the risks that are associated with certain workflows, and put in place measures that will either negate or mitigate those risks. It is a good idea to have at least a general information security policy, and it is always a better idea to have a set of policies that will cover certain aspects of the information security. And again, it is all going to depend on the size of the information department that you have, IT department that you have, and the different workflows that you run through every single day. So when you establish an information security policy, what do you need to? So you will need to define your guidelines. You will need to understand the boundaries to which that policies will apply, and what guidelines and regulations are going to be in place that you will need to follow. That depends not only on your industry, it may also depend on government regulations, so on and so forth. Now, again, we are going to need to assess and identify the risks and address those. We will need to understand what risks may be in place and the measures how to address those risks. And at the end of the day, we will need to document all the processes included in the policies and run the cycle of testing, learning from the mistakes, and implementing new procedures alongside that. When you have the information security policy in place, it's going to help you to streamline your processes, internal processes, and you will have a clear path for on how to reduce, mitigate the risks that you may face, or even negate those risks or find another path. You will have a full control over your information, and you will be able to give you a precise understanding on where you stand. So you will understand time-wise and business-wise whether if you're in a good position in the information security industry or you need to improve. So some other good to have policies, obviously information security is going to be there. It's also going to be a good idea to have an information handling policy on how to classify information. If you have different types of classification of documentation, your internal documentation and the client documentation. You can use a compliance policy and indicate all the regulations and guidelines that you or your employees need to comply with. Data backup policy is an essential one if you are storing or manipulating any data concerning the personally identified information or any other sensitive form of data. Bring your own device policy will allow you to instruct and educate your employees on how to use their bring your own device, meaning their own phone, laptop, tablet, so on and so forth, and how they can be more secure while using that device. Software regulation, user management, access control, those are all policies that can be implemented and will greatly affect the daily business flow and will allow you to have more control over the information security sector of your business. Now let's talk about the human factor. Now, 9 out of 10 of cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error. And this is 2021 statistics. 88% of all the data breaches in 2021 caused by human error. We are going to be the weakest link in the chain. I've iterated this point already a couple times during this webinar. Some of us are going to tend to trust and are going to be easily deceived. Some are not well enough educated on the matter, meaning they don't have enough IT knowledge, or they really don't need to have enough IT knowledge. They are in a completely different field. Some will practice negligence, some will knowingly ignore, maybe insider threats, so on and so forth. So human factor is going to be the most attractive for the attackers, and they will always try the human first, then go for the actual non-human factors if they're trying to break into your system. So what we can do to actually improve our security is, first of all, to raise the awareness of our employees and ourselves in the IT field. So educate, train, test, repeat. It's going to be a cycle. It's going to be a cycle that we will need to repeat on a constantly recurring basis. We will need to define information security principles and guidelines that we will need to follow for our organization internally. We will need to train our employees and ourselves on the news and the new trends of the digital world. We will need to periodically run tests, exams, some other forms of testing of the efficiency of our trainings and identify our weak points. And we will need to repeat this cycle by understanding weak points and where we can improve. Here, we're just going to mention a few best practices that we can employ to improve our digital or cyber security posture for ourselves and our companies in our business. So first, we need to understand what level of security we need. We will need to plan ahead and understand what we need to do. We will develop information security policies, procedures, and if we are a big company, we will also consider creating a corporate cyber culture, which will allow us to streamline the training processes and have all the information security principles guided and aligned. Now, we'll also need to assign a dedicated personnel, or at least someone who will be able to administer our IT infrastructure. Education of the staff and constantly retraining is going to be crucial if we need to stay secure and if we need to keep the level of security awareness high. Access level control, using strong passwords, and considering multi-factor authentication are all good factors to improve your information security posture. And using obviously secure software with secure networks. Through secure networks, the secure software should be updated regularly, is going to be the best practice that you can implement in your software and network connections policies. All right, so now when we have covered most of the webinar, let's move to our next section, which is the Q&A. I'm gonna check if we have any questions. Let's give it a couple of seconds. And I do not see any questions at this point. Anyways, I'd like to thank you for coming today to our webinar. If you have any questions or need to reach out or need to have a demo, please contact us. We will be in touch next week. Thank you and have a great day.